times?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe like 8 or something like that.
It's not so many.
Yeah,
So
I know.
you have something new to reveal about your work then.
Oh yeah, I mean and I kind of get bored repeating myself, so I always try to come at it from a different angle, each time.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
we haven't seen the other one, so you are bright, fresh in this part of Europe. So
yeah, well, that's good. Maybe I can get away with repeating myself, and you'll never know.
yes.
well, we want. This is the good part about, I don't know if we can say that, about this pandemic, because we were able to reach out artists that otherwise we wouldn't have access to, like talking to you, like with 9 hours, you're 9 hours in behind us, so it would have been otherwise. This is just a way of talking with artists as yourself. So I clicked on the recording. So here we go. Joshua Hagler is with us today, and we are happy about that. I'm gonna get straight to it. Joshua, after you finished all your educational forms, after you performed and finished your universities or any other form of enhancing your professional way of working and painting, what is the first thing you did, to enter the life of freelancer artist? What was your first thing? Because you have here my students, which are like 20 years, 22 years old, and they're gonna finish school at some point, and they're gonna go out there and they're gonna have to do something for themselves. What did you do for yourself?
Well, I think my path out of school, as I suppose really probably all paths are, was unique in the sense that, first of all, I didn't go to a designated arts school. And my degree really is in graphic design and illustration. And I didn't get a master's degree after that, mainly because the world that I grew up in, I was so sheltered and had so few sort of like so little cultural exposure, I would say, that I didn't even know that really I should go and get a master's. And I'm a first generation college graduate, which means that no one in my family before me ever went to college. And so our background is quite humble. And I was the first to get to go to college. And I probably had not ever heard the phrase contemporary art while I was still in school. The first time that I saw the inside of an art museum was when I was hired on the weekends as a security guard at the University Art Museum. So I really, oh yes, and I wanted to be a comic book artist more than anything back then. I grew up with comic books, and in fact, I was a comic book artist for a little while. And didn't have much success, but I got some opportunities and did some work in that world. And so I graduated with my bachelor's degree from the University of Arizona, which is like, it's a large university in the desert, but it's not really solely dedicated to the arts. So it's good for things like astronomy. It's not necessarily the best place for art, although I did have some really wonderful teachers. So maybe in a way it was. The other experience that I had when I was there was that I was a cartoonist for our school paper. So I did a daily comic strip, which was maybe the greatest form of education, art education, that I got while I was there. Just the sort of immersion of, for 4 years, how do you make a comic strip every day? And, you know, you have to try to learn to become very, I mean, often it wasn't like a great comic strip necessarily, you know, I mean, I was learning to do it as I was doing it, but it was such a great experience. So really, I must say overall that experience was really good for me. But when I left in 2002, I had no real world savvy really of any kind. And I remember I grew up in a very like quite conservative and like I said, kind of working class kind of background. And so, you know, my family wasn't familiar with the arts or anything like this. And I remember once we visited San Francisco in California, and that was like just so radical to my parents, you know, they're like, we're not going to stay here long because it's dirty and there's lots of homeless people, you know, it's kind of like their way. And when we were there, I just loved it. I just loved being in San Francisco. And so as soon as I graduated in 2002, I took my Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, which is worth about $2,000, which is not very much. And I think I had $500 to my name. And I drove out there and just tried to make it work. So I lived illegally with a friend who was going to the San Francisco Art Institute. I was kind of like a stowaway, a secret stowaway in their little dorm. I somehow, you know, I somehow made it work. But what was great is the first gig I got, which was really coming to the question you asked in the beginning, was I did some illustrations for an erotic gay novel. And I loved doing it. I would meet every day with this French guy who had written it. And then he would kind of tell me what he was envisioning. And it was like the most I mean, it wasn't the most graphic stuff, but it was like certainly sexy, you know? So my first gig going to San Francisco, which I knew that part of the issue that, you know, my family would have had with it is that there are so many gay people there too, or whatever, you know, which I just found it exciting, you know? And so I was basically making these illustrations of these sexy gay men for this erotic novel. That was my first gig in San Francisco. And I don't think it could be more appropriate than that upon moving to a place like San Francisco. It was exciting, honestly. And so I did, you know, illustration and design work where I could, and I worked at a frame shop, and then I worked as a patent illustrator, and just whatever I could do for money, you know, whatever kind of jobs I could get. And my first solo show, where I was showing art in a gallery, wasn't until another 5 years later. And it was at kind of like a small neighborhood gallery that not a lot of people knew about or anything like that. And then it would be another few years really before I could start to have exhibitions at galleries that maybe had a little bit more of a reputation.
So when you were on your own in San Francisco and your parents would call, so, hey, Josh, how are you? You still need money? Oh, no, Mom, I don't need money. I have this great job. I'm doing these illustrations. But won't tell you.
Yeah. I wonder, I don't remember if I told them about that, or it's too long ago to remember. But, you know, the thing was in my family, like you had to fend for yourself. Like nobody was going to ask me if I needed money. You know,
Oh.
It's just like you better get a job, you know?
So this is what you did, like the first years after you finished the college, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah. For like 5 years, I was just doing work like that. I would make my own paintings. So basically, I sort of set this rule for myself. I worked at this frame shop, and I hated this job. And they found a way to basically pay you as little as possible, and then make sure that you don't get like health benefits or something like that, you know, of course, because it's all private health care here and everything. And so if you worked 32 hours, you were considered full time. So they'd work you 30 hours so that they didn't have to give you any benefits, you know? And so it was always like barely just enough to try to survive. And so I was doing trying to get illustration and graphic design gigs, which I would get sometimes, but it's not like I was super successful. So there were plenty of times where I didn't have any work. But the agreement that I made with myself was that however many hours I put in a week at the frame shop, I would put into my work, that I had to work an equal amount of time on my own artwork. And that's when I would make my own paintings. And so I was still really just learning to paint, just in whatever spare room or part of a garage or whatever I could get at the time. And so once in a while I would be asked to, you know, put a painting in a group show or something like that. And so I was just sort of like learning what that world was like little by little in San Francisco.
So until you got like a real commitment with the gallery, you kind of commit to yourself to a schedule that you will work for your art every day, no matter where or with what cost, like in time and money. Yeah. So you were determined to.
Right. So I was working 60 hours a week because I was, you know, 30 hours at the frame shop and then 30 hours on my own work.
Could you do this like now with the baby?
No. Oh my God, no. Different world now. Yeah.
So if you are to make these sacrifices, I'm telling this to my students, you better do it like now, right? When you're young, yeah, you may not have a lot of money, you may not have like a lot of serious stuff in your life, but you have your time, and everything you do, every second of your energy can be put into your dream, right? And look, you got your real like more serious commitment with like 7 years after graduation. So how was your encounter with a real gallery? How was it? How did it work for you, or how does it work where you're from? You just go like you knock on a gallery door, you just call up a collector or a gallerist?
You know, it's already changed so much since the early 2000s. You know, I think I could speak to some of my experiences then, but I'm not sure how relevant they would be to students now necessarily. I mean, are we still on? Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna do, while you talk, I'm gonna just go through your Instagram and website, but you just go on with your story.
Sure. Yeah, well, you know, what was funny is once I realized that I just wanted to be making my own work and not working for art directors and trying to have gallery shows and that stuff, I was just as clueless as anybody as to how to start doing that. And I was around people who'd gone to art school in San Francisco, and they're very cliquish. And so it was very difficult to make friends with other, recent graduates and stuff, young artists my own age. And typically the way that it worked is it seemed like if, you had a friend from art school and they had a show, then they might introduce your work to their gallerist or something like that. But I couldn't really make any headway that way. So one day I lived in a neighborhood in San Francisco called Hayes Valley. And there was around Hayes Valley and Civic Center a few galleries and arts institutions. And one day I just researched all the shows that were in my area and the ones that seemed to have some kind of real interest for me. I researched as well as I could to know everything I could about the artist and the work. Then I dressed as nicely as I could. I didn't have really any nice clothes, but I had one nice jacket. So I tried to look not like an artist, to tell you the truth. I tried to look like maybe I could be an art collector, which I don't know how successful I was at that really, but I tried to look like it was possible that I might have money, So then I walked in there and I just spent a long time in the gallery. When you go into a gallery, nobody wants to talk to you. They deliberately don't make eye contact. But if you hang out long enough, eventually they become so uncomfortable with how long you're there that they eventually have to talk to you, So I just hung out until they felt uncomfortable enough that they had to talk to me. And then I just would sort of try to make the conversation around the work that was in the show. So the conversation was about their artists. It wasn't about me. And when it became clear to them that I was interested in the work and it was something that they could talk about, then they were happy to talk to me. And then as the conversation would progress, I think they kind of became aware that I was an artist, just in terms of the way that I would speak about art, you know. And in a couple of those cases, the person would be like, "Are you an artist?" And then I would say yes. But I would never go in there saying, "I'm an artist, pay attention to me," because that would always backfire. And it's kind of a lot of entitlement that comes with that kind of attitude. So then I would, you know, give them a card, which I had my own business cards made. And so one of those galleries was actually the San Francisco Arts Commission gallery. And a really wonderful woman named Meg Schiffler was the curator there, and I think still is, in San Francisco. And I think in a way she was kind of endeared to me because she could kind of tell what I was trying to do, and she thought it was maybe cute or something. And so she did look at my work. She came over and looked at it because my studio was right near the San Francisco, or the Arts Commission gallery. And she actually liked the work. So then she called a friend of hers who ran a gallery in downtown San Francisco called Frey Norris. And they came and they gave me a show, and they represented my work, which is really unusual, I think. And I also don't think it would happen now. It's just, even since those days, there are just so many more artists working now than there was then. And so, like, when the question comes up of like, how do I get a gallery? How do I start showing? Like, there's just never really a clear answer about that, because, you know, even now, if a gallery asks to show my work or whatever, like, they're never galleries that I approach. I don't ever approach any galleries at this point because it won't work. You know, like, yeah. you have to be approached, it seems like bad advice, because then what are you supposed to do? Just sit on your butt and do nothing and just hope somebody notices you? But I do think that that's the positive aspect of how we've really taken to the internet and social media with our art, is that basically there is a much better chance these days that somebody who never knew who you were is going to see your work than even back then. So on the one hand, I think it's a much less personable art world than it was at that time. Because even though at that time you really couldn't just bring in a portfolio, they would laugh you out of the room. You could still at least like have a conversation.
Yes.
And I don't even think that would happen now. But the compensation is that you can put your work on Instagram, your website, social media. I mean, I don't use TikTok, but I guess some people are. All that stuff, and people will see it. And I do think that at a certain point, if the work is good, somebody will message you. You know, somebody's going to message you if there's something to the work eventually. It's just putting in the time and like.
And also patience, you would say?
Patrons?
Patience.
Oh, patience. Yeah, patience. I mean, for sure. I hear from artists all the time on Instagram, you know, little messages or whatever. And I will say, like, very often they're really entitled. And I don't know where they get this idea that, like, they should just contact anybody and everybody's just going to pay attention to what they're doing, you know? It's like, if people are really into what you're doing, like, you will hear from them, but you can't force it like that, you know? It's they just like they don't know anything about you, but they want you to know everything about them. It's a very one-sided kind of transactional thing that's completely unrealistic. And you know, you need to spend years really kind of showing respect to what other people are doing and learning from them. And then I think, you know, one knows with one's own work when it's really ready. You know, I mean, you have to be really honest with yourself. And then I think, you know, when you have a body of work that you're sincerely proud of, you know, then I don't know, start having conversations with your friends and acquaintances and everybody you can think of, and see if somebody can get an exhibition put together for you. But it's it's just not something that happens fast or easily for most of us.
So you say you get messages from random artists, like asking you to give them an advice or just look at their work, or maybe hook them up with your galleries?
Yeah, all of the above. Hook them up with the gallerist, tell them how I make my work so that they can make work like it.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's not like they're all like that. I mean, for every one of those, there's also, very respectful, very thoughtful. And the thing is like, anybody who contacts me like with a respectful tone, like I do always at least just look at who this is, and if they're posting their artwork on Instagram or they send me a link to their site or something like this, then I will at least glance at it, And the thing is like, if what I'm looking at, I feel is like, oh my God, this is amazing, and nobody knows about this, like, I would definitely want to help that person, But if I'm not responding like that, it's because like the competition is fierce. There are a lot of artists out there, and it's most artists, I think what's difficult for a young artist, is that they see mediocre artists becoming successful. And they think, well, I'm at least that good, And how come this mediocre artist gets all this attention and money and shows and everything like this, but I can't get a show, But it's this sort of bad mentality to get into, because then what are you saying? That like, you want to be rewarded for not being really that great? You think you deserve it because somebody who looks like they don't deserve it seems to be succeeding, It's a weird place to be. You shouldn't want to be like just a little bit better than that other person. You should want to be the best,
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you put it out there.
Yeah, and it's for most artists. I mean, there are your weird exceptions in history. I mean, somebody like Picasso is making incredible paintings at 14 or something. But for most of us, we're not really coming into our maturity until maybe our mid 30s or 40s. And so the sense of entitlement that you would have before that, I mean, I don't know. It's very difficult to be honest with yourself. And it can be kind of terrifying to basically just say to yourself, maybe I'm just not good enough. And then even after hearing that, saying, but I want to be better and to keep working. It's just very hard to say that to yourself somehow for a lot of people.
Joshua, do you think like this making art, making painting, does it get like somehow easier when you approach this maturity, as you said? How do you feel? Like, is it easier or is it getting even harder? How do you feel about it?
It's kind of both at the same time. On the one hand, you reach some kind of threshold where you have no more fear or nervousness when you're working on something. So when, there's never a point where I'm like, oh, am I getting this just right? Or like a little worried that it didn't go quite right or anything like that. In that sense, a lot of things just seem to happen on their own more often, which is a beautiful, wonderful kind of flow or presence to be in as a painter. And I think part of the reason that happens is because of the way that you're evaluating what you're looking at, the way that you're judging it changes. You aren't so beholden to the way you think things ought to look anymore. You're now not, I mean, for me, it's not even really about like one particular vision that I have that I'm trying to accomplish. It's like I'm waiting for some kind of an arrival or a presence to occur in the work that surprises me. And so I am always sort of welcoming where the many places in which the painting, quote, goes wrong, and that's really where all the opportunity is. That's where all the value really of the painting is. And then pretty soon you're not making the kinds of aesthetic judgments you used to make, that something needs to look a bit like this or a bit like that it needs to not look like any of those things, frankly. And so I think once you're really sure of that, it just becomes much easier to feel present with the work that you're making. The harder part is that it's harder to be satisfied in the sense that, like, I can make a painting and know that if I were to do this and that to the painting, it would be popular and I could sell it. You know, if so and so would like it, and it's, you know, maybe it like, I just know what the, you know, many people in the world are satisfied with when they look at painting, but it doesn't satisfy me. That has to go beyond that, you know, it has to go into its own language. It needs to feel as if it comes from another planet. And that is just something that you can't will into existence. You know, you have to create the circumstances in which it becomes possible for that kind of chance encounter to occur. And that is not actually easy, because it just gets, you know, Mark Rothko said that he wanted his pictures to be miraculous. And it's true. Like, I want my pictures to be miraculous, you know, but like, can everyone really be miraculous? And I'm sort of always, that's what I'm really waiting for, is the miraculousness of it, you know. My website is being rebuilt right now, by the way, and I'm seeing you go through it. And, you know, Sam is making me a new site, and it's so much easier to navigate. So,
well, yeah, if you want to, we can also at some point talk about maybe some specific work. But right now, this is the way we did it before. Like, you know, just hearing the artist talk about whatever he's talking and just viewing its works without his translations, you know. But at some point we'll get back to it. So you were saying about this hardship of painting, of making an art work. You know, Gerhard Richter used to say that the hardest part of a painting, of creating a painting, is the last part, like at the end. He sort of feels like that. For me, it's the opposite. It's at the beginning. It's like the first rhythms I get. They have to be right in order for me to continue. How is it for you? How do you mingle between, how hard it is for you to get into your painting? How long does it take? Or it depends? I
agree with him. I think the end is the hardest. And for me personally, the beginning is just, you know, I'm building these layers. It almost doesn't matter what I put on the canvas. And knowing that now, I'm very, you know, it's almost like the more you care about what art is and what painting is and what it can do, it's like there's this paradox where it means the less you act as if you care while you're making it, like the more casual you are with it, the more sort of free and bouncy you are with it. It's you're not uptight, you know, you're breathing slowly, for me personally. And so it's very, I'm just at ease, frankly, through most of the process, but it's that end that he's talking about. And, you know, it was Philip Guston who said that the only relevant question about painting is, when is it finished? And that's a little bit of hyperbole maybe, but I think that there's a lot of truth in that. And that is the hardest part, because you're waiting for, you know, it's like waiting for a dinner guest. You know, you set the table, you made the meal, you set everything out, you sat down, the candles are lit, and you're just waiting for that knock at the door. And how do you make that? You can't, you know, I mean, you can make everything else, but you can't make the dinner guest arrive, you know? So it's, when do you know that the dinner guest has arrived in the painting? It's a very difficult thing to know. Sometimes it just knocks you over. It's so obvious. Like the dinner guest just comes bursting into the room and you're like, oh my God, it's you. I've been waiting all this time, you know? And other times you're not sure. And I think if you're not sure, then later, about a year, 2 years later, after you've made the painting, it becomes real apparent that painting actually wasn't great. You know?
Had it ever happened to you to work again on a surface, on a painting that you put it away like some years ago, or you're unable to connect again with something you already processed?
Well, I mean, it really just depends. I don't.
You never tried it, I can see, right?
Yeah, yeah. I don't really. I don't know. All the excitement for me is really in the making. So, even if I'm looking back at something a couple years later and I feel like it still works, I'm not really seduced by it anymore, I suppose. I think that's just why I have to keep making more. I mean, on some level, they all fail. They really, like, none of them actually really get up and walk around on their own. It's like I want them to have their own consciousness and to be more than they can be. And so there's always maybe some kind of like slight disappointment later that the thing wasn't the guest. It was a guest, but it wasn't the guest,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I know. Because we've mentioned this process, how does it work for you in your studio? This is something we've been asking all our guests. What do you do? How do you get in the mood? Or do you have a ritual? Do you have like something you always do before starting to work, or not?
Yeah, these days I do. I needed to create some kind of ritual because I'm nuts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was just gonna drive myself crazy. So these days I meditate every day before I begin in the studio, which is something you have to make time for. And I find that the longer I do it, the longer I've been at it, then the longer I am meditating. So these days it's about an hour.
When you say you're meditating, you adopt a certain way, like, I don't know, just yoga or something, or is something you have created, a way of your own way of meditating?
Yeah, I'm influenced by Buddhism, but it's kind of my own thing too. It's sort of like like if a Buddhist came out to the Rocky Mountains.
Okay.
How would a Buddhist meditate, So I can't. I have no flexibility, so I can't even sit in like lotus position. I just sit on a chair, and I'm outside behind my studio, and I meditate out there for a while, and I have a whole breathing thing and a mantra, and it's really just about with trying to be like transcendent. I'm not trying to. I'm really just trying to re-ground myself with the world that I actually live in, rather than being stuck in the abstract of terrorizing me in my head.
And does it really work, this ritual? Does it get you in the place you want to be before you start to work?
Yeah, exactly. So what it does it makes me able to focus on one rather than trying to do multiple things or do one thing. I'm just doing the one thing and focusing on the one thing.
Okay.
I take much slower breaths. I have a better on, so it's almost like rather than visual, it's like a visual thing. That's, I think, at a certain point in painting, more important than the visual. I mean, like some of the paint now, I think, got where that was understood. It was still more of a visual concern than a touch concern. Some of those. So yeah, that's what I do every day. And then another thing that's like a kind of, I don't do this every day, but I try to do this as often as possible, which is that I basically just roam the countryside. Sometimes that means going on a hike in the mountains. Sometimes that means investigating abandoned places. So where I live in New Mexico it's the second poorest state in the United States. So there's a lot of poverty here. And so there are a lot of abandoned buildings, abandoned schools, abandoned churches, abandoned houses. So what you call ghost towns, you know, like real Western ghost towns. And I will just explore those areas. And that somehow contributes to my contemplative practice. And I will often feel that I am in touch with some kind of memory that exists in the space itself. And it seems that that palpable sense of memory and the evidence of time's passage really stays with me when I'm making the work.
So the time you mentioned the time passing.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something you would like to be felt when we are looking at your work? Because it, now that you say, it kind of have the textures of your painting. They do seem
Right.
like, you know, like time is bits of time or space are just lefting the image, are, you know, I don't know, știe cineva cuvântul la decojire? I just asked my students if they know the word, because I don't have it in English in my mind. Anyway, it kind of seems like bits of something that are detaching. Yeah, that's the word. Detaching.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, and like this painting we're looking at right now, what do I call this one? Oh yeah. Okay, so the way that my website works, like what you're looking at right now, is basically I'm giving a little bit of insight into the process here. So these two smaller ones that are, if you scroll down a little bit, I guess there's three small ones and these little icons. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So exactly. So this is like a little study of a mother holding her baby on the day the baby was born, and the other little study is of the father holding the same baby on the day that this baby was born. And this couple was killed in a mass shooting at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, which is near where we live here. The mother was shielding her baby, and the father was shielding the mother, and the baby survived. And this little one you're looking at right now is called The Time Given. So you can kind of even hear from the title that time is on my mind. So I'm using those as studies that, as I'm making this painting that we're looking at now, all these details, I'm scaling this. It's like on the first layer and last layer, actually, of this painting that we were just looking at, I painted that mother and child as well as the father and child.
Yeah.
And then basically then I cover the entire image, and then I paint the other image on top of it. And I scrape, like, first of all, the surface of an abandoned building that hasn't been painted in a long time, that's maybe sitting out and baking in the desert sun, and you see all these layers of paint and they're sort of like peeling off. And stratification, you know, like in the gold something is based on what layer of strata it's. And so, you know, that was an intentional part of this process. There's a desire to commune with those you know, I call it, you know, like epistolary. So it's almost like you're trying to write a letter, those who have, in this case, mass shootings in the United States. That's even in the town where I live now, there was a mass shooting. There's been so many mass shootings, you know, that there's just really nowhere that they're happening. And so I wasn't sure that I was waiting for to arrive, then I just turned on and it somehow worked. That was by turning it upside down. There's just like, can you see that this woman is upside down? Can you? I'm like pointing at the screen like you can see me, but you know.
Wait.
If you do this, Look at the picture
okay.
like this, you know, and you'll see at the bottom of the picture is a
here?
head, you know. Yeah, vaguely, exactly. The eyes are sort of closed. Yeah. She's basically all but vanished. I mean, like, I don't even think I would call this a figurative painting, but if you wanted to search for it, there's a figure in there. And many of my paintings are this way, you know, like the images are just completely gone, frankly. But there's something about the activity which I think contains the seed of the consciousness that I had tried to get in touch with at the time that I made the work. So this one is called Trace of the Mother 4. And the reason for that actually was that, you know, my wife is also a full-time artist, Maya Resnick, and we did a show together in 2019 in LA, and she made these paintings, Trace of the Mother 1, 2, and 3. And since we were doing this show together, because I could see this trace of the mother, and can I call it Trace of the Mother 4? I asked, and she said yes. So it's sort of like a weird kind of collaboration. You know?
So yeah, as for the process, because you've mentioned for that painting, it came out like pretty abstract, let's say, or far away, far enough from a figurative image. So you start from a pretty realistic image that you have maybe in your head or somewhere printed, and then working on it becomes this.
Yeah, and you know, the work, it really changes a lot from year to year. So like as we're looking at this, you know, everything that you said is true with regard to this painting. So I made this painting in well, it would have been 2018 or 19 because I had the show in 2019. And it's actually these layered Max Beckmann paintings. Yeah. And so I was looking at German expressionists at that time. And so I was still like I made these studies that were, you know, made with ink and oil, and then reproducing them at a larger scale. I am already doing a lot less prep work. So I work a lot of times now just from sketches that I made in maybe like 10 seconds. And there's no real kind of like color study ahead of time necessarily. And everything is sort of falling apart more and more. So yeah, this one was very much like a really good example of that process, but that process now is sort of breaking down into something else. So
you used to prepare a little bit for your paintings, like to make sketches, drawings?
Yeah, like a lot. Yeah, like these. Actually, can you X out of this?
Yeah.
Click out of this. If you scroll down, okay, you see the last 3 thumbnails. These are 12 by 16 inch panels. And there's studies after Beckmann's work. I think this painting is called like City Nights or something by him, and this one's called The Dogs Grow Larger. And when this one we're looking at now was actually only ever a small watercolor that he made like in his sketchbook that he never actually committed to a larger painting. So I'm basically making a study of a Max Beckmann study for this. And so I was, just basically layering these and scraping them out each time. And then, you know, the large painting that you see is what I ended up with.
And you gave up this process right now. So you kind of enter to the painting, like you just go at it.
Yeah, I mean, I still do these layers, you know, where, you know, I'm using some kind of imagery, you know, one on top of the other and subtracting. But the imagery is mainly just coming from my own drawings that I make. Really, actually, like, I might actually have examples here. Like, this isn't the best example, but it's just what's in front of me. Like this drawing I just did the other day when I was walking on a
Put it
trail.
closer to the camera.
Yeah, that took like 10 seconds, you know.
Oh, okay.
And it's a fisherman on a river that I happen to be walking by. I will probably never make a painting from this, but it's just an example of the kind of sketches I've been doing. So then I make this drawing and paint, but then all the color and everything that's in it is just done really quite quickly, without too much deliberation. And so what's happening is that the paintings are, they appear to have less and less imagery in them. There's less and less concern about narrative and more concern about presence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It totally does.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of technique, what's your favorite? One or a combination of technique? What are you using? Oils, acrylics, or?
Yeah, I mean, all of it. Yeah.
All of it. Do you have a favorite one?
Well, I mean, I think of myself as an oil painter, so I guess you could say oil, you know. I mean, the whole thing, nothing would look the way that it does if it wasn't that I was using oil. So, yeah. But I really just like I don't think I'm not romantic about materials, really, or even colors, honestly. It's really just the process that I'm after.
So whatever gets you there, it will be your technique and your tool.
Yeah, you know, and I think so much of it is unlearning so many of those techniques and becoming unattached to so many of those tools along the way. I mean, I think that I'm shedding skin, basically. I'm trying to get rid of more and more to try to sort of boil it down to what's really essential.
Did you have like an academical training, like you had to do figures, studies of the nudes, figures, or still lifes? Did you do all that? Like,
yeah, we did that. All that stuff was required for illustration as well, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in my illustration class, I mean, I have figure drawing classes. I mean, and, you know, I do have a knack for figurative drawing and for color theory and academic type of painting, you know. But I think I just got very bored of those kind of more conventional approaches around like 2011, you know, because I was making quite precise and realist work for quite a while.
Because I can see that there is some let's say academical training, or because the composition you end up with in your paintings, it reveals a sort of strong knowing, if I may say,
Mm-hmm.
of the structure of an image.
Mm-hmm.
And you get there once you had to do a little bit of drawing, and when you had to organize the surface, when you had to work with the line, the thickness of the line. So as you said, with this kind of paintings, like you are indeed trying to shade away, like you unlearn all that process and,
Mm-hmm.
and just go with.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Else.
And I find that like the way that you know, we were talking about meditation earlier, like the way that works for me too is something I think reflected in the way that the work is looking more and more too, where it's like, you know, I would love to be like a Mark Rothko type of painter, you know, somebody who really has just this one or, you know, few essential colors, you know, and all the presence in the world is just there in those colors. When I meditate, I spend quite a while just like having to let my mind go through all the like anxieties and crap I have to do and stuff that I've been angry about, and like I do this thing where I start to go on some kind of inner monologue, and then I have to let that drift away and get through all of this junk to get to a place, hopefully, where I'm finally present with what's right in front of me, you know, present on the planet, present in reality. And I think the paintings are kind of like that. You know, it's like, I'll never be a Rothko type because I never feel like I exist in some kind of pure reality or pure space or anything like this. I always feel like I sort of have to like break through all these walls, or sort of have to like let all this junk that I'm carrying with me sort of fall away. And so I think the work kind of like shows this process of having to get through all this imagery, which in the end almost just becomes an excuse, you know, excuse to make a painting. Like, I worked with this image or that image because such and such was on my mind, but in a way it's not even really about whatever the supposed narrative is. It's about whatever is underneath that. You know, there's this poet, Frank Gaspar, that I like to quote a lot when he was talking about Willem de Kooning. And he says that it's not the aboutness of anything, but the wailing underneath. And I think that's really right, you know. So if I could just go right to the essential thing, then I would, but I can't. So I have to like create all these things that I destroy in order to shed enough skin to get to that place where there's real presence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's kind of getting Rothko in all of this. Like, probably he got in that place where you say, like, creating an image that it's not bound to anything, that it's pure. But in all of that, he paid a big price. I mean, you do all this process to get in that place where you could do what he did.
Right.
Probably he get there like just struggling with all the shit he had, and that finally got him to his end, like the tragic end, right?
Right. You know, I think you're in the figurative painting section of the website, but if you get out of the figurative stuff, so go to image, go to image again. This is why we're getting a new website, but go to landscape here.
Oh, landscape. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so I think, you know, this speaks more closely to what we've been talking about for the last few minutes, you know. This is why I can't be Rothko, because I've got to go through all of this, you know. But, you know, hopefully in the work, there's some kind of authentic presence to it after I've gone through all the, you know, and this is an example too of a painting that was made just from referencing quick sketches. Like, there were no kind of color studies leading up to this. All the color was just sort of like invented on the fly, you know, in the process, just improvised as I went along.
Joshua, did you ever like got stuck, like really stuck, like writer's block? Okay, did it ever happen to you, or were about to happen? And if it did, or if it were to happen, what did you do to snap out of it?
I've never had that problem, honestly. With years.
Lucky you.
Like, well, I've literal writer's block. I've got, you know, because I write too. I write poetry, and I wrote an arts column for a while, and I have 3 unfinished novels and an unfinished screenplay, and I had my own graphic novel series when I was younger that I wrote as well. So I do write a lot, and I do is very hard to write. Maybe it's just because I'm like not as good at it as I am at painting, but so it's something like writer's block occurs. But when it's painting, you know, the thing is, my wife says that there's no such thing as a good idea, and I understand what she means by that, you know, as it relates to painting. It's, if you understand that, then that's how writer's block doesn't happen, because you have these ideas, but the ideas become excuses. I mean, the ideas are just what get you to wherever you're trying to go in a painting. If you could get to a place where you weren't even having ideas when you made a painting, that would be quite an achievement. That'd be a good thing, you know? In my opinion, it would be. I think painting making a painting and designing an image are two different things, you know.
In what way would you say?
Imagery is easy. You can draw it, you can take a photograph, you can slap an image down on anything, and we live in a world that's completely inundated by images. So the more images we're surrounded by, the less value they have. I mean, in terms of painting, now it might be a different story when we're talking about like editorial photography or something like this. Okay, somebody came in and took pictures of like a war zone, and now the world is more aware of it because, you know, that has real utility. But I think painting is about like this interaction that you have with the surface of something. So it's some kind of a confrontation. It's a way of interfacing with reality that you wouldn't have any other means to. I mean, this goes all the way back to cave painting, you know. I mean, this is like, it's a kind of affirmation. It's like a metaphysical place, you know. That's the thing. Like making a painting is to be in a place, in a space. It's more about being than doing or making. And when that presence of mind is entered into, then I believe paintings will often contain a sort of residue of that consciousness. And when the right viewer is ready, in the right context, in the right place, at the right time, then the viewer comes and gives something to it that basically, because when the painting comes out of the studio, it partly dies, you know. If it's alone, it's just sort of like in hibernation. And when the right viewer comes along at a certain point and they think, huh, what is that? You know, and somewhere in themselves, a space opens up. And when that space opens up, they start to ascribe things to that painting. They start to give to that painting. They give their consciousness to the painting. So it's like the painting and the person is meeting halfway. And somewhere in the space between the painting and the person is another kind of consciousness. I think that is what painting uniquely can do. It doesn't mean it even usually does it, but it can do it sometimes. And so to do that is it's a much more complicated concern than like making an image that has a narrative that maybe just says something like, here's a person with a prop in a room doing a thing, and that has some kind of cultural meaning of some kind, like a kind of symbolic meaning. I'm not against that. I just, you know, and I've done that kind of thing for a long time. It's just, I think it's that I have done that kind of thing for so long that I'm like, I feel that at this point in my life, it doesn't have any real power. And maybe it just doesn't have power for me. I don't know. But that's kind of what I mean. It's much, making a painting is just a much different ball of wax than just designing an image. And I know that there are, you know, you have artists like, I could name a half dozen people, and I don't know if I want to. But like maybe their assistants make their work for them, you know, and that the artist designed the image, and then the assistants used paint to fill in the right color in the right place, and then you have a painting. But I don't think that's a painting. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that may be just creating a message, you know.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
And the way to deliver it, but that's not necessarily creating a painting. I know what you mean. Right. And still, I don't think while you are painting, I don't think you can process all of this. As Michael Simpson said, that when an artist is creating, he's just trying to solve a problem. Is this how it happens to you while you're in front of painting, just trying to solve a problem?
Yeah, I'm trying to solve a problem. The problem I'm trying to solve is like, like, where am I? You know?
And does the painting help you to figure out where you are?
It does. It does. And not just like simply to make an individual painting, but basically half a lifetime now making paintings helps me in the sense that yourself is revealed to you, but you realize that the self is also not the self. You know, it extends beyond, you know, a body, that the consciousness that kind of comes through us is something that we share with the world in some way, you know, the physical world, the natural world, the social world. And okay, I think it's very difficult for people in general, and especially for artists, to have a sense of belonging, to feel that they belong somewhere, and maybe even that their lives have value or meaning at all. And we try in our lives, I think, to belong to something, an ism of some kind, a family maybe. We're trying to have some kind of affiliation to kind of tell us who we are. But I think artists oftentimes, and certainly for me, I've had a lot of trouble feeling that I really belong in any of those things. And the art, the work, the process of making painting over time and constantly reconsidering and getting a deeper feel for what you're doing and a different kind of sight, it's like a kind of repatriation. So it's like a kind of coming home to a place that doesn't even have a name. I wouldn't know what to call it. It's an orientation with the world that goes beyond and beneath the language that we have to describe things in everyday reality, and in our culture, in politics, I mean, you name it. I mean, like we're sending messages out there every day, all the time. I mean, messages are cheap. You know, I mean, you can say anything you want. You can be a troll on the internet if you want to. You can put people down. You can try to express why your ideas about the world are better than their ideas about the world. All this stuff, there's plenty of messaging like that going on, and none of that stuff gives me any sense of what it means to belong in reality. None of it. But something about the process of going out and looking to the world and then looking inward and finding this place that's neither totally interior nor externalized space, but somehow both at the same time, is an affirmation that I belong. And I don't really know how else to do that. So this is the one tool that I have, you know, it's the one kind of practice that I have. And, you know, once you finish a painting, I mean, the difficult part is once you finish a painting or it comes out of your studio, you have to kind of like then participate in society again. and it just like, I mean, if you just take like the art world is anti-art, you know, I mean, the art world just kills everything. And so then, you know, you're back to this sort of, you know, this congested kind of abstraction again. And at some point you got to get back in the studio, back on the landscape, back in the world, and sort of find your deeper connection with the world again, you know?
This being said, Joshua, how do you deal with criticism? Bad or good, whatever?
I don't know, because nobody ever criticizes. Everybody's so damn polite, you know? Oh. It's like when once in a while somebody has constructive criticism, I welcome it, because like I don't know what people think, and it's like, thank God, like somebody's telling the truth, you know? It's like it's helpful. I like to know how other people see it. I don't want to exist in a cave, you know? I'm afraid that some of what I just said might make it seem that way. It's really not the case. I really want to be in dialogue and conversation with others about art, about just about anything really, but about art in general, about my art, about their art, you know? So when once in a while somebody is critical, it's very valuable to me. I mean, even if I don't see things the way that person, I mean, yeah, that only makes it more valuable if I don't see things the way that person sees. If that person sees things radically different than I do, then it's quite useful to me.
So you're ready to make like a let's say bad criticism, you know, to turn it around and make it, you know, make that energy for you, right? To go forward.
Yeah. I mean, like, so criticism, I should maybe rephrase a little bit of what I said. I am actually accustomed to daily criticism because Maya and I are in each other's studios every day, and we're constantly involved in the other's process. And so I hear from her, and she's my most trusted confidant. She's the I that I trust more than anyone else's I in the world. And so, you know, anything she says, I really listen if she says something isn't working. And in contrast, if she's really affected by it, then I know that I've really got something. Like, I can believe that I've got something if she's really affected by it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other critic, which is me, which is the toughest one of all. So like, as you're flipping through these images, a lot of these things I'm seeing on my site, I'm like, oh my God, I need to take that down. You know? Like, yeah, I definitely am not pleased with all the work we're looking at here.
Well, that's a good thing, Joshua, isn't it?
Yeah.
That means you are able to
doesn't exist anymore, I should say. Go back to this first image here. That we were...
the one with the boots?
Yeah. Yeah, this painting doesn't exist anymore. The boots still exist. Those boots I love. I'm keeping the boots. But this painting doesn't exist anymore.
This one?
Right. It became a different painting. So close out of this. And then go back to image. I'm pointing at the screen again like an idiot.
I get back here.
And see this one called entry, this black one? Go up. This one called entry with the black and yellow.
Ah, entry. Oh.
Yeah, that's what it became.
Oh.
I changed it. So it was a white painting, it became a black painting. And it's in my current show.
Why did you change it? Why did you purely didn't like it anymore, or you just?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't. I felt like it didn't have anything. Yeah, and I regret showing it. It was like I didn't rush it for that show, but I think that when I had that show in 2019, I had finished it not too long before, and I just didn't have enough time with it. So entry, the black one now that we were just looking at, that has something, that really has something to it. It has some kind of power to it. When you see it in life, you don't have any idea looking at it in the JPEG, like how thick that painting is. I mean, it feels like a stone, you know? And some people see it and they think it's like underpainting or something, but that's like, you know, it's thin painting on top of like a lot of layers.
So you're very fond on texture, on I don't think I'm saying it right, texture, because it's more than texture. There is thick to this texture.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you also like the tactile. I don't know if I'm saying right.
Yeah.
Like the need to touch it, or to touch it with your eyes or something.
Yeah.
Maybe you know when you like Jack White then.
Jack White? What do you mean about Jack White?
Because he also worked with the thickness of the painting.
Uh-huh.
Like yeah, he also
made... Jack White the rock star?
No, maybe I'm not saying it right.
Is there another Jack White I don't know about? That might be.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up now if I'm saying the word right. But tell me about this thickness. How do you do it? Is there every time that there's a different way to reach out to it, or you have already a way?
Well, some of it is just the layering of the paint, and then some of it is the substrate, you know, the surface that I'm working on. So if a surface has a lot of age already in of itself, it seems to contribute to a feeling of richness and decay and crunchiness, you could say. And it's just, you know, it's just so many layers, and the layering happens in different ways. I can layer with, you know, a water-based paint and put like a barrier kind of between it and the layer beneath, a resist of some kind, so that it sticks but it doesn't bind. You know, I can do that kind of thing. I can use what do you call it? The plaster that's
plaster.
Hydrocol plaster. That's what I want to say.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of chisel some of that back out. You know, I've used silicone in the past. People are always asking me how I, you know, what those materials are or whatever, because they want to do it, and I generally don't tell them.
You don't.
I just said more right there than I usually do.
That seems just about right. I mean, I didn't say it more like what's the recipe. I meant more like, you know, if just how it happens, not like you add 50 grams of that and then you add this. Yeah, and the artist was Jack Whitten. I'm sorry, I was looking at the white painting, and I just stuck with white in my head. But it's Jack Whitten. He also used silicone and acrylics and you know the story.
Stuff of his that I've seen is like even like, you know, quite a bit thicker and more dimensional than the stuff I'm really working with. Because a lot of that is kind of like assemblage type stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that kind of thing. I flirt with it a little bit, but I really don't like it when it starts to feel like a bunch of things are glued on something, you know?
Yeah.
I just can't seem to make that work.
Look, we are talking about an hour already and even more, and I would not keep Josh too much because he has a little baby and he's needed. Just for a second, we could hear her. Yeah. What's her name, Joshua?
Mila.
Mila?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I will go. We have some questions here from my students, and one is it's rather complex one, but I will say it either way. How different is the art industry in America compared to Europe? I don't know if you know that, or if you had a grasp of what that means, but.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if I answered this question, I really like expose my bias, because I have a lot of bias against the art world in the United States. I would probably treat my assessment of the European art world more favorably than the one in the US, but that might also really just have to do with the fact that I have much less experience in Europe and that I actually just know less about it. Mm-hmm. It is a really broad question, and I actually am a little like reluctant to go into a lot of detail because I think if you're an artist like I am, who's sort of been in it a while and kind of has a general kind of mistrust for the art world, then you can kind of like ruin it for students or younger artists. Because there's a way in which, like, a big reason why I've been able to like remain kind of committed and determined and keep going is frankly that I didn't know very much when I started out. There's a real value in that kind of naive approach, and you know, if you knew everything in advance, I think you might quit before you get started. And actually believing that things are possible is really important to making them possible, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I would just, you know, I just think that the most concise way to put it, most of the trouble has to do with all the money in the art world. Most of the trouble has to do with the money motivations on the part of actually not just the collectors, actually everybody, on the part of the artists, on a part of the dealers, on a part of everybody. And I think, you know, in the US, there's sort of a culture of one-liners, of easy images and one-liners. So like if I make this sort of like punchline sort of at the end of a joke, and I have a sort of like, you know, one little kind of trick that I do in the painting, and I do that one trick over and over again, then somehow I can become rich and famous. It's sort of like this celebration of competing narcissisms, you know, like. I don't know. I'm not into it.
Yeah.
But whatever the case is, you know, there is, like, you don't have to take on the whole art world. You just have to do your one little part, your one little thing, and your one little part of it. And I think that if you aren't greedy and shallow, you know, you got to understand that, like, if you're really digging deep, if you're really trying to do something that really feels as if it matters to you, you know, if there's complexity to it, it's not going to have a mass audience, generally speaking. And so you just need to know that what it's really about is being able to connect with others who are as kind of authentically involved in what they're doing as you are with you. And, you know, if you have this community around you and you're having good conversations and you're creating some opportunities to show, and that's good. You know, the best thing that you could ever do for yourself is create the situation that gives you the most space and time to make work with the most amount of time that you can. And then just really try not to worry about or think about the rest of it.
Okay. Another one. What are the dimensions of your canvases? Like the average dimension. They look monumental. Maybe it's the effect of the pictorial strokes. Quite amazing. Congratulations for your artwork. This is one of my students. So yeah, it is. They seem monumental, but we don't really. Some of us we could see how big they are. But in general, do you prefer big or small, or doesn't matter?
I love work when it's really big or really small. This medium-sized work that I have trouble with. If you click on the Instagram tab again.
Yeah.
And then close out of this. Scroll down a little. Okay, go back up. Stop. This bottom right one. Click on this.
One?
Nope, underneath that.
This one?
Yeah. Okay, so that's a really big painting. What size is this? I can't remember the exact dimensions offhand. It's something around like 10 by 15 feet, I think. Well, look at me using feet. It's pretty big. But you see this other one on the wall? That's also mine. You know, this is part of the same show right now. And that thing is tiny. It's a weird shape too. We can find a better image of it on Instagram if you want to. But
no, we've seen it already on your website. You have like a small series of.
Yeah, those are those two scales that there you go. That really small one and the really big one are the two. That's what I like to do. I like really small and really big. And I think generally people think of me as this painter who makes these huge paintings, but I actually make a lot more small paintings than I do big ones. And I think what that tells me is just that if it's big, people notice it more.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's small, but that's the power of small work. You know, small work doesn't grab your attention immediately, but it can really pull you in, and you can have an intimate sort of contact with it that large work, it's not possible with large work. You know,
exactly. It doesn't come to you at any cost. Like,
right.
You have to sort of find it.
Mm-hmm.
In a show, which is something right. Only small works can do. So another question: what artists influenced you the most, if you have been influenced by?
Well, so like I said, I grew up really without any exposure to art, and so all the, you know, my exposure was to, you know, animators and comic books and that kind of thing. And I remember I took a modern art history course in college. And I remember the first time that I saw 3 painters that I think are, all 3 of these painters are still in my work to this day somehow. And that is Robert Rauschenberg, Anselm Kiefer, and Francis Bacon. And when I saw those artists' work, I just had never seen anything like it. And it just seemed to connect with something in me that was already there. And that I thought, wow, this is what you can do. This is what is possible. I didn't even know anything like that was possible, you know, before I saw that work. So that was really, it wasn't until I saw that work that I really started to make paintings. And although the paintings that I was making when I was first learning to make them didn't look anything like those artists. I mean, in a way, the work I'm making now looks more like their work than it did back then. But yeah, they just really made me want to paint. And then anyway, so I, you know, after that, I worked through a lot of different influences, and many of them were really quite negative. I mean, they're quite limited, I think.
What do you mean negative? Like,
well, I think that they gave me, you know, when I was talking about like money in the art world and like, you know, the commercial art world or whatever, like a lot of stuff that we end up seeing that sort of rises to the surface and gets seen by a wide audience is often really bad art. And but you don't necessarily realize that at a certain time in your life, you know?
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of these kind of negative influences that I had to work through. You know, I learned something from all of them for sure. But after I learned what I needed to, there's a long process of unlearning. And so it became about being less and less influenced by others. And I think that's really important, you know. If I'm still influenced by a contemporary artist, it would be my wife, Maya. Because we are so involved in the other's process that I know how to think like her. I know how to look at things the way that she does. It's sort of, you know, we're sort of an extension of the other's body in a certain way. And there's just no way really to overstate the influence that she's had in my work. So that's not something I'm ashamed of. I actually feel really good about that. You know, I think it's exciting. It gives a lot of meaning to our relationship and everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, other than that, you know, going back to Kiefer, you know, he just affected so much my way of thinking about art too. I mean, the way that, you know, his layering of history and politics and culture and mythology into something that becomes an object like that is something that's been very important to me for a very long time.
Okay. Yeah, and that would be it, because I had another question here, but you kind of already answered it to it. Like how do you deal with the distrust of the art world, having to live in it? But you kind of said how you deal with it and how you perceive it.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth addressing just quickly again. Like, I think, like I said, it's changed a lot even since I started. I think social media is something to look out for, you know. I mean, if you need to use it, you need to use it, but it can also create a lot of like comparison and envy and all this kind of stuff. And you see all these things you don't like and you become very unhappy and you have anxiety and depression and all of this stuff. And so, you know, if I go out and have like a dinner or something like that and there's some collectors present and some art world insiders and that kind of thing, it's a very anxiety evoking thing for me and for a lot of artists, I think, because the conversation has never really gonna have a lot to do with the work very often. I mean, maybe you can do that like when it's a one-on-one conversation, or maybe like 3 or fewer people or something, but you've got to create your own contact with the world that's separate than, you know, what was it, Sartre, who said that hell is other people, and it's this idea that, you know, whatever you do or you're doing is like, you can sort of project the gaze of the other onto whatever your activity is or whatever. So there's always somebody else in the room with you. And that kind of links to something that I think it was John Cage who said that, you know, when you're in the studio, everyone is in the room with you. And then, you know, your family, your friends, whatever. And if all goes well, one by one, they all leave the studio. And if you're really lucky, you leave, you know, and I understand what he means by that. What he's saying by that is that your own judgments leave too, like your own kinds of like sort of limited ways of thinking that have occurred over time because you're so concerned about the way that other people think and talk about things that you're not even yourself anymore, that you can't even get to your kind of deepest authentic self in the studio. And so that's what, you know, these things like these walks do for me in nature and these abandoned sites, and what meditation does for me and all this stuff is it sort of like regrounds you to the world as apart from the abstraction of the art world that can get in your head and just really mess with you. Yeah.
They get the people out of your studio, right?
They do. They get everyone out of the studio, and when I'm lucky, they get me out of the studio too.
Yeah. Well, Joshua, thank you very much for your conversation and for your thoughts. Everyone, this is the last chance to put up a question if you have. If not, I will just end the conversation with a typical question, or maybe asking more. Even though you kind of already mentioned from time to time, like, what would you say, Joshua Hagler, an advice for the young to be artists, if you have one, if you feel like, you know, think about telling yourself something that somebody would want you to have told you, I'm too many times, too many verbs. If you are younger, yeah, you will find yourself in the studio right now in the college, and you will go to yourself, the younger self version of you, and what would you say?
Yeah, I think I always kind of say some version of the same thing. And I think sometimes the way that I've worded it hasn't been helpful, and I've been thinking about how to rephrase it. But I think maybe it's just this, that, you know, whatever your kind of next steps are, that what you're aspiring to is not to go through all the sort of rungs and hoops that you think you need to go through, or that you're trying to stay as free as possible. The main thing is you're trying to stay as free as possible, free in your work, free in your life. And that can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, you know. It doesn't, it just means that you aren't, when you're in the studio, feeling indebted to some set of expectations or a way of thinking that you think are going to please other people, that they, you know, or they expect of you, and you're trying to do this because that's going to be your angle in the art world or something. Like if you're thinking about angles, that's not good. I think, you know, if you're thinking about style, if you're thinking about tricks, none of that stuff is good. It's about the inquiry and the interface and the sense of being that you have when you're alone with the work. And it's very, I mean, we all want to share our work at some point. We want to have an audience of some kind, but we can't be deferential to them. You know, this isn't, it's like you forget who you are in that process. You think you're, I mean, what happened for me is that, like, I thought I was a part of something that I wasn't. You know, if you're trying to be a part of something for someone else's sake, then it just makes you useful to that, but it doesn't make your work good necessarily. It doesn't contribute to your freedom and your well-being and the quality of the work. So, you know, do whatever you need to do to survive in the social world. But, you know, when it comes back to making the work and all the activity that you engage in that contributes to the work that you make, it may be valuable to ask, like, is this coming from me, or is this some kind of sort of mimetic kind of thing that I'm doing where I've seen it out there in the world, or someone has said that this is what I should be doing at this time in this place because it's relevant and whatever else. Like, that is maybe keeping you from sort of individuating in terms of the way that you make the work. And that's actually going to be what's most important through your life, and ironically may contribute most to your overall success. So there's like a kind of all these like carrots that get dangled along the way that if you think you take, then that's going to make you successful, but they don't, you know, they really don't. And there's this way too that like people can tell when another artist is free in their work, and it's liberating to the people who encounter it, even if that person didn't think that they would like something like that or whatever. Suddenly they find themselves sort of like free vicariously through your sense of freedom with the work that you're making. That's like the most important thing you can do. So that's it. That's the advice.
Probably that's what you felt when you first encountered Neo Rauch and who else did you said you?
Well, I didn't say Neo Rauch. I do like him as a painter, and he was an influence too. Yeah. Maybe you're thinking of Anselm Kiefer.
Yeah, because they're the Germans. Yeah. Kind of the same generation. Yeah, Anselm Kiefer. Yeah.
Yeah.
You felt the way his freedom worked, and that kind of liberated you probably in your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's highly structured work. I mean, it's really kind of rigorous and scholarly, but I mean, you can tell that he gets like juiced up and excited about all of that research and everything, all that reading that he does. You know, I mean, that's what he does with his freedom. You know.
Yeah.
And you know, I know that he has really developed philosophical ideas about, you know, the way that those sort of ideas and the surface and the process and everything like that are sort of married into this sort of conscious poetry, you know. And I feel that in the work, and I'm convinced by it. So, I mean, we're just using like one person who happens to be super famous, but somebody doesn't have to be that famous for you to like
exactly
work, you know.
Yeah, you're totally right, and I'm glad you said it, because there's more artists that are very good, but they're not famous, than artists that we know and they are good and they're famous. You can encounter someone in your town that it's good and can, you know, do a lot for you.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the sort of pecking order of the art world doesn't really reflect like the pecking order of the quality of the work. You know, sometimes there's an overlap, but it's not really the same thing. It's not the same set of concerns. You know.
Exactly, not the same set of concerns. You said it right.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk forever, but I'm afraid we'll have to end here. I'm glad you accepted. I will say that again. And maybe, you know, some time later, next year or in the next few years, we will hang out again for our students, because I think this has been a very productive encounter with you and your works. And I'm glad we did it. So thank you.
I really appreciate it, and I'm happy to come back and talk like anytime. And I really appreciate your interest in the work and asking me to do this. And my thanks also to all the students who are here participating in it. So thank you.
Well, thank you all, and see you in the studios, my students, and Joshua, keep up the good work.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Bye.
Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you. Bye.